So this is an after-action review of Balkovzy Surprise, a combat mission, Barbarossa to Berlin mission. I'm playing as the Axis against AI. The Soviets are AI. And basically the objective here is to defend this bridge and this town. The bridge is the major goal, and defend it against an attack from the Soviets that's coming from this direction. So I'll just give an overview of my setup, and then I'll just describe what happened during the mission. This is what my setup looked like. And the reason I have this setup is because I saved the game before I started the game, after I had set up my forces. So my original goal was to try to keep my forces together so that they could help each other. And so with that in mind, I moved some forces that I had in this yellow zone over to this far side of the bridge. And then originally I had tried moving some green forces over here, and then I realized that if I moved my green forces over here, then the enemy could take these buildings, and they would have very good fighting positions to attack me closer to the bridge. So I ultimately decided to not keep my green forces right up next to my yellow forces, but instead to keep them on this edge of the town, with the idea that they would prevent enemy infantry from taking these buildings. Because if once the enemy infantry could take these buildings, then they would be in a good position to attack the bridge area. And so the way I set up the black zone forces, the Kolkhoz forces, was I moved my tanks so that they would fire sideways into enemy tanks that would move over this bridge. One of the key things to note about this mission is that visibility is limited to about 200 meters. And so I set up my tanks. So I set up this tank so that it would fire into enemy tanks just as they had moved into this open ground, and also enemy infantry once they moved into this open ground. And I set up this tank so that it had this keyhole position where he could fire at enemy tanks in this very narrow view place so that he wouldn't get overwhelmed. I set up my platoon HQ in this building so that he could observe enemy advancing. I set up my heavy machine gun, or I guess light machine gun, on the far side of a building so that it would get attacked by enemy infantry and enemy tanks. The building would serve as cover, and it would fire sideways into enemy infantry that might try to advance this way. And then actually specifically, the goal of this light machine gun was specifically to prevent enemy infantry from advancing into these buildings here. So it wasn't so much to defend this ground as it was to defend this ground. That's why this light machine gun was here, to defend this ground from having enemy infantry advance into these buildings. And now this squad I put on this far side of the building so that it would defend this ground right here from enemy infantry that might advance into this building and then attack my tank with grenades. So that was the general idea. It was position infantry on the far side of the building so that they're defended against enemy fire, and then have them fire sideways. Not really have them only be able to observe like the ground that enemy infantry would need to cross in order to attack my tanks, or attack my buildings here, which would allow them to attack the tanks. So I thought that was a pretty good setup, and it ended up working very well. So as for my yellow forces, I put this tank here, Panzer IV. It's in a hold down position, and the idea was just to have it defend this ground here so that the enemy infantry couldn't attack my tanks. And I only put it there because, the visibility is limited to 200 meters, so this was like really the only immediately useful thing I could give it to do from the beginning, was just have it guard this ground, and it worked great. It really did work great because the tank did defend this ground, and the enemy infantry did actually try to attack from this direction. Same idea with this heavy machine gun. Same exact idea, where the goal is to defend this ground from having enemy infantry advance into that building, which would allow them to take out that tank, which would allow the enemy tanks to advance, which would just cause all kinds of problems. So that was the goal of this heavy machine gun position. Guard that ground, and it worked out great. Section AQ, I just had it spread out so that if the enemy ended up attacking these positions, hopefully the Section AQ wouldn't get, accidentally hurt. But I just left it a little bit enough forward that it would be able to help observe with their binoculars. But I didn't expect this position to be doing much, although it is close enough that it could help attack any infantry. And then, just as a backup, I had this tank hunter team set up right next to the bridge in case the enemy tanks got this close to the bridge, but I never ended up using these guys. The enemy tanks never got close enough to my positions where I would have been able to use this hunter team, and I'm still just not that familiar with how to use the hunter team, so I wouldn't have known. I just assumed that the way to use them would be to wait for a tank to get really close and then have them run up and try to plant a mine on a tank. So I never used them. As for these green zone people, I set up one squad in this build. This is like the only heavy building in the town, and I've gotten the impression that heavy buildings are way more useful than light buildings or anything else. It's just like one of the best possible defensive positions you could be in. So I left these guys in this position just to, as a strong defensive position. I ended up having them run into the light building to help when the enemy infantry ended up attacking from this direction. But at the beginning of the game, I just wasn't sure where the enemy was going to come from. So just in case the enemy came down this road and came in this direction, I kept these guys here so that they could guard this building and not let the enemy take this building, because it's a very strong position. I set up a squad here just to guard this ground, this avenue of approach. Here's platoon HQ, heavy machine gun, rifle squad. This is my company HQ, which gives a very strong fighting bonus, and a light machine gun. And then I just position this tank so that its flank in this direction would be guarded by the building, and it just can fire into this position. I honestly wasn't really sure what to do with this tank, but I think this position worked pretty well, because I think it did help guard against enemy infantry attacks. And later on in the mission, I had it reverse out of this position and then hunt towards these two buildings, and it ended up taking out some enemy tanks that were advancing this way. So yeah, that was my setup, and I guess I'll just load what it looked like at the end of the game. This is a 17-turn mission. So this is what it looked like by the end. This tank, which was in here, ended up getting hit, and it just reversed out of that position. But this one was fine. It did get hit, but it was able to attack until the end. The infantry squad, yeah, you can see, was routed. They took a lot of casualties, but they did a lot of damage to enemy infantry. The enemy infantry tried many times to attack this building, and they turn off the sound. They tried many times to attack this building, but they were never able to get in because the enemy, this squad, kept hitting them and was able to turn them back every time. Likewise with the platoon HQ. Yeah, you can see light machine gun. It's fine. It ran out of ammo, but it did its job. The Panzer III, you can see what I was talking about, where I had it was originally here. I had it reverse out of that position and then hunt in this direction to help take out these tanks that were advancing at the end. these guys, this squad, I had them run over to this light building, but then when enemy infantry were able to get over to this side of the town, I had them run back to the heavy building just in case this squad somehow made an attempt to advance on the flag. But you can see, like, I suffered very few casualties to my side. The enemy infantry really got destroyed here. I had my squads hiding at first, and the enemy infantry just kept running this direction, and then I had them unhide when they were about, you know, what is this, 50, 100 meters away, and they just took a lot of, they did a lot of damage. Yeah, so you can see my defenders didn't really move. These heavy machine guns still there. This tank was originally here, and then I had it hunt forward to help take out these tanks. But yeah, overall it went very well for me.